We build everything here from Superbirds, original stuff, and then we got one section of our business up here just modifies new cars.
A ton of power.
Most people believe the greatest treasures in NASCAR are displayed inside museums. They picture polished championship cars, shining trophies, and perfectly restored racing legends sitting behind velvet ropes. But in the small town of Level Cross, North Carolina, one collection has remained almost completely hidden from public view for decades. It doesn't sit inside a famous museum. It isn't advertised to tourists. And according to those familiar with it, its owner has repeatedly refused opportunities to let the world inside. That owner is Richard Petty. For generations, fans have wondered what remains inside the old Petty garage. Rumors have circulated about championship-winning race cars, forgotten prototypes, priceless memorabilia, and personal items that have never appeared in exhibitions. But the greatest mystery isn't whether those objects exist. It's why one of NASCAR's biggest icons has chosen to keep them out of sight for so long. To understand the mystery, you first have to understand Richard Petty himself. Long before he became known as the King, he was simply another young driver trying to earn respect in a sport that demanded everything. Growing up in the Petty family meant racing wasn't just a weekend hobby, it was daily life. His father, Lee Petty, had already established the family as pioneers in NASCAR, while relatives spent countless hours building engines, repairing damaged cars, and searching for even the smallest performance advantage. Their workshop wasn't glamorous. It was noisy. It was crowded. And nearly every success the family achieved began inside those walls. Over time, that modest garage became the birthplace of one of the greatest dynasties in motorsports. Richard Petty would go on to win an incredible 200 NASCAR Cup races, 7 championships, and 7 Daytona 500 victories. Even today, those numbers remain almost impossible to match, cementing his reputation as one of the greatest drivers the sport has ever seen. But here's what many fans don't realize. During Richard Petty's racing career, nobody viewed old race cars as valuable collectibles. Once a season ended, teams focused entirely on preparing for the next one. Damaged cars were stripped for parts. Others were sold. Some simply sat outside because there wasn't enough space to store everything indoors. Looking back now, Petty has admitted that nobody imagined these machines would someday become historic treasures worth enormous sums of money. They were simply tools built to win races. That makes what survived even more remarkable. Instead of disappearing forever, a number of Petty's race cars remained at the family property. According to Richard himself, somewhere between 15 and 20 cars stayed behind, many left exactly as they were after their final races. They weren't restored to factory condition or carefully prepared for display. Time was allowed to leave its mark. For collectors, that almost sounds unbelievable. Most rare race cars spend years being meticulously rebuilt until they look brand new. Richard Petty chose the opposite. Every dent, every scratch, every faded decal. Each one tells part of the story. And sometimes those imperfections are worth more than perfect paint ever could be. Among those surviving machines, one name immediately captures attention: the Plymouth Superbird. Few race cars are as instantly recognizable. With its towering rear wing and pointed aerodynamic nose, the Superbird looked like something from the future when it first appeared. Built specifically to dominate NASCAR's high-speed tracks, it quickly became one of the most famous stock cars ever produced. Richard Petty and the Superbird became inseparable. Whenever fans picture his legendary blue number 43, this is often the car that comes to mind. Yet unlike museum examples polished to perfection, the Superbird, believed to remain in level cross, reportedly still carries the marks of competition. Instead of hiding its history beneath fresh paint, it wears every battle scar with pride. But perhaps an even more meaningful vehicle rests nearby. A humble 1957 Oldsmobile. Compared with the dramatic Superbird, it appears ordinary. Yet without it, none of Richard Petty's later achievements might have happened. Built by the Petty family during NASCAR's early years, this was the machine connected to Richard's first steps into professional racing. Before television cameras, before packed grandstands, and before millions of fans knew his name, there was simply a determined young driver hoping to prove he belonged. That old car represents possibility. The Superbird represents achievement. Together, they tell the complete story of a legend, from uncertain beginnings to unmatched greatness. But according to those who know the property best, the cars aren't actually the most emotional part of the garage. Because hidden beyond the workshop is another room. A place that reportedly contains memories no amount of money could ever buy. The deeper you look into Richard Petty's hidden garage, the more you realize this place was never meant to impress collectors. It was built to preserve memories. According to people who have spent time around the Petty family, a smaller room sits beyond the main workshop, one that has rarely been discussed publicly. Unlike the race cars parked outside, this room reportedly holds the pieces of Richard Petty's life that never appeared in Victory Lane photographs or television broadcasts. Among those keepsakes are boxes filled with letters. Not business correspondence. Not sponsorship agreements. Just handwritten notes from ordinary people. For decades, fans from every corner of America mailed letters to Level Cross. Some thanked Richard for unforgettable races. Others shared how watching NASCAR with their families became a lifelong tradition because of him. Children wrote about wanting to become race car drivers, while veterans described how Sunday races gave them something to look forward to after difficult times. Most celebrities eventually throw away thousands of letters as the years pass. Richard Petty reportedly didn't. Instead, many of them were carefully stored away. Perhaps they weren't valuable in a financial sense. But to someone who understood what loyal fans meant, they represented something far more important than money. Another part of the collection reportedly reflects one of NASCAR's greatest friendships. Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt Sr. spent years competing against each other, becoming two of the biggest names the sport had ever seen. Their personalities were completely different, but mutual respect slowly developed between them through countless battles on the racetrack. When Earnhardt tragically lost his life during the 2001 Daytona 500, the entire racing world stood still. Rather than placing every reminder of that friendship on public display, Petty reportedly chose to keep certain personal items inside the private room, where they remained part of his own memories instead of becoming museum exhibits. Then there's another object that almost nobody expects to find. Not a trophy. Not a championship car. But the battered remains of one of Richard Petty's worst crashes. In 1980, Petty survived a terrifying accident at Pocono Raceway that sent his race car violently airborne. It was the kind of wreck that could have ended everything. Instead of destroying what remained afterward, the damaged frame was reportedly preserved exactly as it came back from the track. No restoration. No repainting. No attempt to erase what happened. It serves as a reminder that behind every record and every victory was a driver who accepted enormous risks every single weekend. As Richard Petty's legend continued to grow, so did the value of everything connected to his career. Collectors realized that original Petty race cars had become some of the most desirable pieces of NASCAR history. Auction prices climbed. Museums searched for historic vehicles. Private buyers reportedly offered enormous amounts of money for items connected to the king. Some experts believe the collection inside the garage could now be worth many millions of dollars. Yet despite repeated interest, Richard Petty refused to sell. The surprising part is that he didn't make those decisions only during successful years. He reportedly turned down offers even when the Petty Racing organization faced financial challenges and the money could have helped the business. That tells you everything you need to know. The garage was never an investment. It was never a retirement fund. It was a family archive that couldn't be replaced once it was gone. Fans sometimes wonder why Richard Petty didn't simply donate everything to a museum. The answer may already exist. There is a museum dedicated to the Petty family's incredible history, allowing visitors to see championship cars, trophies, uniforms, and countless pieces of NASCAR history. But according to those familiar with the collection, the museum represents only the public chapter of Richard Petty's life. The private garage tells the personal one. Then came the event that changed everything for the Petty family. Adam Petty. As Richard's grandson prepared to carry the family name into another generation of NASCAR competition, many believed the dynasty would continue for decades. Instead, tragedy struck. Adam was killed during a practice session in 2000 at only 20 years old. His death devastated the entire racing community, but for the Petty family, it became something much deeper than a headline. It changed how they viewed legacy. Suddenly, every old photograph, every race car, every tool hanging on the wall carried even greater emotional weight. The garage was no longer just a place that preserved history. It became a place where the family could remember those they had lost. That may explain why Richard Petty became even more determined to keep certain parts of his life away from public attention. Today, visitors still travel to Level Cross hoping for a glimpse of NASCAR royalty. Most leave talking about the same thing. Not Richard Petty's records. Not his championships. But his kindness. Despite becoming one of the most recognizable figures in American motorsports, he continues to greet fans with the same warmth that made him beloved long before social media existed. Meanwhile, the work continues at Petty's garage, where historic cars are restored using the same craftsmanship that built the Petty reputation generations ago. In the end, the mystery of Richard Petty's hidden garage isn't really about rare race cars. It's about the difference between history and memory. History belongs to everyone. Memories belong to the people who lived them. Richard Petty has already shared his racing achievements with the world. His records are written into NASCAR history forever. But behind one quiet garage door in Level Cross remains the part of his story that statistics can never explain. Perhaps one day those doors will finally open. Perhaps fans will get to see every forgotten race car, every handwritten letter, every worn-out tool, and every priceless keepsake. But even if that day never comes, maybe that's exactly the point. Some legacies aren't meant to be sold. Some collections aren't meant to become attractions. And some stories become even more meaningful because the people who lived them chose to keep them close. For Richard Petty, that hidden garage isn't simply where old race cars were stored. It's where a lifetime of victories, sacrifices, friendships, and family memories continues to wait exactly where he believes they belong.